Hello, and welcome to another NABBW Author Chat. Today we're talking with Bree Stedman, author of a book that has just recently come to our attention, and I love the name of it, Own Your BS, the No-Nonsense Guide to Addressing Your Female Head Talk. In my years of doing these NABBW calls on topics of interest to baby boomers, I don't believe we have ever talked about the issue of baby boomers and negative head talk, but we should have, because, as Bree says in her book, 1 in 3 women admit to struggling with anxiety, stress, overwhelm, and feelings of unworthiness. 1 in 3 women. That is a huge percentage, and it's just unfathomable to me that we haven't addressed this sooner, and so I'm very glad that Bree has brought the subject to our attention with her book and given us a chance to talk about it. In the book, Bree cites sobering statistics from a number of sources, 3 sources, headspace.org, the Australian Bureau of Statistics and Anxiety, and the Depression Association of America. And to tell you about those statistics, I'm just going to pick up page 8 of her book and read them to you because I think that, that would be the best way for me to really make sure that everybody understands just the magnitude of what we're talking about. Studies on physical female brains only commenced in the 1990s. Prior to this, all information collected regarding emotional blocks, behaviors, and healing was identified as a result of either studies done on male brains or studies done on baby male castrated mice. Yes, this includes medications specifically developed for females. The reason for this predominantly lies in the complexity of our hormones as a constantly changing hormonal state, which means testing is more challenging. 1 in 3 women admit to struggling with anxiety, stress, overwhelm, and feelings of unworthiness. Next point, women are twice as likely to be diagnosed with anxiety and panic attacks. 4th, depression is more prevalent in women, as is PTSD, or as we might also know it as post-traumatic stress disorder. Postnatal depression is on the rise. It is believed high levels of stress, and specifically the production of the stress hormone cortisol, contributes to this. Her next point, anxiety affects 1 in 8 children and is more common in children with depression, eating disorders, and ADHD, which is, of course, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Globally, 17 million children are prescribed medications, including antidepressants, stimulants, and other psychotropic or mind-altering medications every year. In the U.S., children 5 and under are the fastest-growing segment of the non-adult population prescribed with antidepressants. I know this is true because my second child, my son, was one of those children that had a hard time in school because he was a very active child and he didn't like to sit quietly in a chair and sit there and try to learn. And the first thing that the teachers told us as soon as he got into school was, he has ADHD, he needs to be on drugs. And I'm going, what do you mean needs to be on drugs? But therefore, I'm with you on this, Bree. I know exactly how this happens in schools in the United States and apparently in Australia and other civilized countries. So clearly, we've got a topic here that is important and we need to talk about it. But I'm curious, why is it that even though there are thousands of self-help books available to help women develop confidence in themselves and their dreams, women are more stuck in negative head talk than ever before? For a number of years now, baby boomers have been identified as having higher rates of depression than previous generations, and mental health experts expect treatment-resistant depression to become more widespread as baby boomers age. We are seeing treatment-resistant depression more, and we are recognizing it more, says Helen Levrutsky, a geriatric psychiatrist at UCLA. And in older adults, the answer to understanding what it is and what to do about it is more complicated than in younger adults. And the consequences of depression among older adults can be devastating. Of course, the consequences of depression in any age is devastating, but in older adults, the situation is that persistent depression can raise the risk of early death and suicide, expedite memory decline, and lead to a loss of independence. Think about it. Have you ever heard that voice inside your head saying things like, I can't do this, or I can't do this, I'm too old? How about, I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough? I'll never be as good as her. What if I fail? Or the opposite of that, but still the same. Oh, God, what if I succeed? I feel like such a fake and a fraud. And then there's the other side of that coin. I hate who I've become. How about I don't even know where to start? What if I'm not who they expect me to be? What if they figure out how old I am? How can I be who they want me to be? I hate how my life is right now. And then there's the really hard to take ones when you hear this in your head. I hate being a mom, or I hate being a wife. If you've heard these things going on in your head, and if you're a woman, I suspect you probably have heard them, then it's a good thing that you're here tonight to listen and meet tonight's guest, Bree Stedman, because Bree has been there too, but she's found a way back to success, sanity, and happiness. Bree tells me that 8 years ago, those very same sorts of dialogue comments were accompanying her every single day. It fueled her lack of worth and sabotaged her success, her happiness, and her life. And to quote what she says in the book, I was building a business as if I had my shit together, while internally doubting myself every step of the way and disconnecting from my family. 5 years ago, I got a grip on my BS. I learned about the female brain, how we as women process and release emotions, how different our brains are, and how our hormones have a direct effect on everything from our moods, our energy levels, our ability to communicate, our emotional states, and more. I started to live my life according to my female factor, and I began to create the life my family and I deserve. What a wonderful quote, Bree. So that's the purpose of our call tonight. We're here to talk about negative female head talk, which Bree has labeled as our own personal BS, and I just love that you put it there, just out there, and put it what it is, BS. We're here because Bree is the woman that we've been looking for, the woman who's walked the talk and has walked the walk, and now she's talking the talk, as I should have said, and she's here to help us claim back our personal power, passion, and purpose. Now that I've laid out that scenario, let me introduce tonight's guest and share her credentials. Bree is the founder of Emotional Confidence for Women and the Emotional Detox Program. She's been working with women for more than a decade and is passionate about helping them to be more confident in who they are as individuals and their ability to influence the world around them, particularly children. Bree has been a keynote speaker for a number of female-based webinars, including the Young Women and Entrepreneurs Association and the Extraordinary Mompreneur Community, a feature blog author for a number of online magazines, and a guest presenter and trainer at a variety of direct selling organizations. Studying at the Institute of Women International, Bree has exclusively worked with emotional confidence since 2013, teaching women about the power of their thoughts, the connection between stories or head talk and their emotions, and the female factor. And when I say female factor, she puts that with 2 capital Fs, so it's a thing, not just a phrase. But what she is really enthusiastic about is seeing women really own their personal power, create a life of passion, and live with purpose every day. And Bree is very good at what she does, because let me quote you from one of her students, a young woman from Australia whose name is Magali. She says, I started to work with Bree at a time where I was lost, depressed, stuck, full of self-doubt about my role as a mom, wife, and working mother. She helped me to work through the BS that was holding me back. I have tried many things and coaches before, but things did not settle or work for long. Her techniques work so well. I am now so calm, relaxed, joyful, confident in the future. My head talk, which was there and prevented me from sleeping, is completely gone. She gave me the techniques to maintain my emotional confidence, to continue life with peace. I can only recommend Bree to all the women. She brings life-changing power to you. What a wonderful quote, and thanks for joining us today, Bree.
Thank you so much for having me. That's it sent shivers down my spine hearing you talk about all of that, because it's such a prevalent issue for so many people, you know, learning how to work with yourself and how to empower yourself so you don't get caught up in those traps.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for having me.
Oh, we're delighted to have you. And so having given you that wonderful, lengthy introduction, and I say wonderful because well-deserved, I don't want to take any more time with that, because I don't want to lose out on the time for us to have a chance to talk. So let's just get started right away with some of my questions. The first one I'd have to start with, what led you down this path to specializing in head talk?
So there were two areas that really encouraged me to go down this road. One was my own personal journey, which I'll go into a little bit, and the second was the stats that you were talking about earlier with the 1 in 3 women experiencing anxiety and depression. I worked in direct sales for almost 10 years prior to doing what I do now, and I had a large team that were all women. And what was so alarming to me was that the amount of negative space that women get themselves into because of their lack of confidence with themselves. So when I was, supposed to be teaching women how to run businesses, I actually found I was more in a counselling role more often than I was actually teaching how to run a business. And what was frustrating from my point of view, I loved that women were coming to me for guidance, but what was frustrating was it was the same issues reoccurring time and time again. And it wasn't just, 1 or 2 of my team, it was the large majority of my team that were really struggling with their own self-worth due to their head talk. And I used to say to colleagues of mine, if we could help them to get in between their heads and clear out what was going on in between their head, in between their ears, then we'd be able to help them to build more successful businesses, because it's what happens between the ears that dictates whether or not we're successful or not. So that was one part that sort of led me into head talk, is the experience that I had with working with women. I could see that was a physical block that women had. The second was my own, and this was where I felt quite hypocritical at the time, because I was very good at giving advice to other women to help them to address their own stuff. But I was also struggling with this sense of feeling like a fake and a fraud, because even though I was good at what I did and I got great results from what I did, I felt very unworthy and very out of my depth. And personally, I was really, really struggling. So in my book, I talk about my journey a little bit more, but it accumulated to a point where I became physically violent with my kids, because I didn't have coping strategies. I didn't know how to work with the negative talk in my head, which was resulting in, I hate being a mum. And as a result of all of that, I became physically aggressive. So on the surface, I had it all together. Like I say, I had my shit together, and people outside of the home only knew me to be positive and empowered and successful. Behind closed doors, completely different story. So it got to a point where I just recognised if I didn't change me, I wasn't going to be of any service to my family, and I wasn't going to be of any service to the people that I worked with long term, because I was destroying my own existence.
I can totally identify with that, and I would have to say that I haven't told very many people this, but during the time when my children were young and I was working full-time and trying to be a mom and a wife, there was a morning when I couldn't get my daughter out of bed, and I ended up jumping on top of her bed, on her bed while she's laying in it. And then I think I actually shook her shoulders to try to get her to get out of bed, because, time was short. We had to get moving, and she just wanted to stay in bed. And then my brain is going, what are you doing? You could be arrested for what you're doing. But I will confess here that I did that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that was exactly what happened with me. There was, and this is why I got so excited, I suppose, by the female brain aspect of things, because logically I knew that my behaviour was completely inappropriate. My son at the time was 4, so he was still a baby. And I would pick that kid up like he was a sack of potatoes and throw him when he didn't do what I wanted him to do. And so there was that part of me that logically was saying, this is so wrong. And like you said, there's a shame and guilt. And, I can't admit to anyone that this is going on, because my kids will be taken away from me. So there's a lot of fear in that behaviour as well. But the emotions were so strong, because the pressure that we put on ourselves to perform, and time pressure is such a stupid pressure that we create for ourselves, that it would charge the emotional drive. So rather than being able to think logically, which is something that women lose the ability to do the more emotional we get, I would just react, and that's where the behaviour came from.
Totally, I understand that. Well, thank you for explaining it from your point of view. Next, let's talk about, was there a specific moment that I told you about my moment? Was there a specific moment that highlighted to you the importance of addressing your head talk?
Yes. So not long before I sort of sorted myself out, my son and I were having an argument, and his punishment was to put him into a bedroom where we could separate him from the event to try and calm down. And those scenarios where you've got one child on one side of the door and you're on the other side of the door, and you're screaming at each other. And I mean, I look back on it now and I think, why on earth was I screaming to a 4-year-old? Because, like, I was the adult. And he was screaming at me. And my daughter, who was 2 at the time, she was crying for me because she needed something. And I remember just thinking, I just need to shut this kid up. So in that moment, I slammed the door open, knowing that he was right behind it. The door caught his toenail, ripped his toenail off, and he started screaming. There was blood everywhere. I walked into the room and said, well, that's what you get for not doing as you're told, turned around and walked out. That was the moment when I knew that if I didn't really get a grip on what was going on, I was, one, genuinely scared that I was going to hurt him really bad, long term, and secondly, that, you know, everything would escalate to a point where docs or, you know, the government would be called and I'd lose my children and then I'd lose my business and everything else. So that was the point where I knew if anything was to change, it had to come from me first, because as a 4-year-old kid, and this was the conflict that I had, was so many people were saying, well, Blair's ADHD, you know, he needs help, he needs boundaries, it's all his fault. And I kept thinking, how can it be his fault? He's a kid. I'm the adult. I'm the one who's reacting to him just as much as he's reacting to me. I need to fix this problem before I can help him. And so that was the moment when, and hence the title of my book, that's when I took ownership. That's when I stood up for what needed to change and owned my shit.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I'm fascinated with how it was that you discovered that there's a difference between head talk that men might experience and female head talk. And I am aware, because I've read the stories that I cited from one of your facts there, I've read about how for eons, centuries, whatever, you know, time that medicine was working, they always studied men. And they always seemed to think that women were the same as men, and so whatever they did and found out with men, or drugs worked this way with men, that it would work the same with women. How was it that you figured out that female head talk was different from what men might experience?
Yeah, so I went to a seminar that the Institute of Women International held, and this was in the early days when they were just really starting to launch, and the whole seminar was on the female brain. So I suppose the sort of pivotal moment for me was when she started to talk about why women who, let's say a man and a woman have an argument, a man in a man's head can look back at the argument and go, okay, well, what happened in that argument? I came in and I said this and then she said that. So they make logical sense of why the argument happened. And in a man's head, because they're more logical by nature, the moment they've created logic, they can go, oops, makes perfect sense. I can now release it. I can let it go. I can move on. With women, we can have all the logic under the world. We know that what we're thinking about is nonsense. I knew the way I was behaving was ridiculous. You know the logic of it, but you keep replaying it. And this is where we've been trained long term to think that the more you understand the story, the more likely you are to get over your problems. So what happens in the female brain is every time we go back over a story, let's use the example of a husband and wife having an argument, when the woman goes back and analyzes the story, the thought process recharges whatever it was that she felt in that moment. So if she was feeling angry, she's going to feel angrier. If she was feeling unworthy, she's going to feel even more unworthy. When she then goes and talks to her best friend about that argument, the emotion charges again and it strengthens the emotion and the tie to the story. This is why, if you've ever had a girlfriend come to you and she's been upset, she starts to talk about the story. You always see, it's like our emotions run on a bell curve. They escalate, they build, they get worse, they peak, and then they drop down. And it's that habit of talking about the story that builds the emotion that is the main significant difference between male and female head talk and how we need to approach it. Men need logic and understanding of the story. We just need acknowledgement of what is the story making us feel, and then let's work with the emotional undercharge, because when the charge isn't there, then we can look at the story from a logical point of view and release it. So it comes back down for us, predominantly the emotions.
It seems to me, once you explain it that way and make it so clear, that if we look back at a lot of, I don't know, in Australia, do you get Hallmark Channel? Because we have a station in the United States called, we get Hallmark Channel, and a lot of the Hallmark Channel movies are very female-oriented, relationship stories, and it seems like there's a standard way that the movie always goes, but it always involves a failure to communicate between the male and the main male and female character, and they always end up, the guy goes back and talks to his guy friends, the women talk to their women friends, and if you think back about any of those movies, the couple, the two men and the women, they are exactly exemplifying what you're talking about. The women are more emotional. He did this, he said this, and how I felt, and the guy is going, I just don't get it. This X, Y, Z. Why couldn't she see it? Totally what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So
so
let's talk.
It's fascinating.
I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No. I was just going to say No, you're right. Yeah.
All right. Well, what are some other differences with the gender differences that impact the way we speak to ourselves?
Yeah. So in the physical brain, we know that men brains are bigger physically. When you break up the components of the brain, females have a large limbic system. So the limbic system is the emotional control center of the brain, and it controls a whole heap of different functions in the body. But where it comes in regards to head talk for women is our ability to vocabularize whatever it is that we're feeling is much broader and wider than that of men. So when a man is feeling something emotional, he'll often come home and he'll say, I'm feeling angry, or I'm stressed, or, I'm afraid. They've got very limited terminology to express the way that they feel. And this is where, I suppose, really honing in on what it is that you feel, knowing that whatever you feel and however you describe that is right for you. So when it comes to addressing your emotional charge, being okay with however you feel is so important, because that's your limbic system's way of communicating. So an example would be, man feels angry. A woman can feel angry. She can feel pissed off. She can feel like she's about to lose it. She's about to snap it. She's frustrated. She's irritated. All of these different variations of what traditional sort of man thinking would consider feelings of anger feel very different in the female body. And you can test it out for yourself. If I said to you, tap into this feeling of frustration, you're going to be able to feel what frustration feels like for you. If I then said, okay, clear frustration, and now I want you to feel like you're about to lose it, like that memory of you getting on your daughter's bed, I'm going to imagine that if you think back on that, you just lost it. You weren't angry, you just lost it.
That's right.
And then if you compare lost it to anger, it's different again. So when we come to actually working through our BS, and when it comes to working with our emotional undercurrents, giving ourselves permission to label whatever it is that we're feeling according to what we feel it is crucial in order to release it for its truth. Does it make sense? Whereas a man would traditionally go, okay, well, you're about to lose it. Isn't that angry? Well, why are you feeling so angry? And you're sitting there going, but I'm not angry. I'm going to lose it. He can't comprehend that lose it and angry are two completely different things, because in his head, it's not. But for us women, it's very, very different. The other thing that's really different from the female perspective is, of course, our hormones. So, and I think this is probably going to be fairly relevant for you and your audience. Regardless of age and regardless of the appearance of a regular period, women from the age of puberty right up until the day we die will constantly have a fluctuating hormone change. So what that means is, depending on where your estrogen and progesterone levels are sitting at, your ability to feel emotions and think through emotions and communicate, as well as your energy and your appetite, are all impacted by the way your hormones are showing up on that particular day. So the idea of, being the same kind of person every single day and showing up in the same manner every day is not realistic for women to even consider, because tomorrow's hormones are going to be different to the concoction that's currently in your system today.
Fascinating.
They're two of them.
Now, I have to ask, when it comes to postmenopausal women, I assume that you're saying, from what I heard you say, we still have those cycles, even though we might be postmenopausal. Now, men sometimes who think they're enlightened might say something to a woman when we're starting to get a little upset, and they might say, something on the order of, are you on your period, or is your period coming up, or but, when we are postmenopausal and we don't have a cycle that we can keep track of, how in the heck do we answer that question? How do we anticipate that we might be feeling more emotional some days than others?
So again, it comes back down to tracking. So in say my age bracket where I do have a regular cycle, my hormone cycle probably looks a little bit more like a tsunami in that there's high highs and there's low lows, and it's very clear where I'm at, particularly for people who know me. For postmenopausal women, you still have a cycle, but it looks a little bit more like a gentle current or a gentle flow. So there's really minor peaks and there's minor lows. The best way and the only way that you can really see what your cycle looks like for you is to track it. Now, being postmenopausal, it means your cycle, instead of being a 28-day cycle, could be a 60-day cycle, where for the large majority of the time you're feeling really good and calm, but then you'll have a couple of days where things hit lower, and so you feel a little more tender. So when your significant other says to you, oh, God, are you on PMS? I think that in itself, it's almost like women are ashamed to say, yes, I am on PMS, or yes, I am on my period, because it's become a taboo topic. And that, I think, is half of the problem. The fact remains, we have hormones. Men have testosterone. Once men hit puberty, their testosterone levels don't really change. So hormonally, they don't ever understand what it is for us to go up through our highs and lows. And instead of trying to make them feel comfortable by pretending we don't have our cycle, or pretending that our hormones aren't impacting our moods, the more we say, well, you know what, yes, I am. I'm having a tender couple of days. So you've got a choice. You can either come at me and know that I'm going to react back, or we can just respect the fact that I'm a little bit tender and we can try and navigate this together the best that we can.
Excellent. That takes some good communication skills, though. Starting to lay the ground rules out between the couple so that he knows what she's talking about.
Well, there's two things. There's communication to him, but it's also understanding self, because you can't communicate your needs if you don't know what your needs are.
Very true.
So I think the greatest gift that a woman can give to herself is to truly understand what her cycle looks like to her and what she's capable of doing at that point in cycle, because there are days and even now, postmenopausal, you would know that there are days when you just don't have the energy to stitch together two words in a sentence. And then there's other days when you do feel more naturally energetic. So part of working with the female factor is to know when is your optimal time and work with it, and then give yourself a little bit of compassion and grace, so that when you're feeling a little low, you just go with it, knowing that that is a part of who you are naturally.
It totally makes sense to me. It reminds me, I don't want to totally get off track, but it reminds me of a time when my daughter, who's my oldest child, was coming down with mumps. She wasn't very old, less, 3 or 4 at the time, so her ability to articulate things wasn't really clear, and I had no clue what was going on with her. So I finally, because just she wasn't herself, I felt like, with no other way to figure out what was wrong, I took her to the pediatrician, who looked in her ears and said, she's got inflammation, she's got earache, and I said to her when we were driving home, I said, why didn't you tell me that your ears were aching? And she said, I didn't know they were. And that was, a thing that I realized she'd never had an earache before, so she didn't know how to talk about what was going on, because it never happened to her before. So
is that saying of you don't know what you don't know?
Right. That's when you said that, you don't know what you don't know, that hit me. That story came to me, because that's exactly what she was telling me, is, how could I tell you, Mommy, that I had an earache when I didn't know there was such a thing as an earache?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's get back to the head talk. I gave some examples of head talk in my introduction, but let's talk a little bit more about some common head talk that you see in women.
I think most head talk comes from women's need to compare themselves to other people. And particularly nowadays with, the access to social media, we have constant examples of how we should be living life thrown in our face all of the time. And so if you're feeling insecure, it's natural for you to look at someone else and judge yourself based on what you're seeing in someone else's life in that split moment that you see. So common head talk is, negative head talk is going to be anything that leaves you feeling less than being in power of yourself. So thoughts like, I'm not good enough, she's better than me, why would people want to come to me? I loved that you were giving examples of, what will people think when they find out how old I am? And that's a head talk story that women, I think, of all ages have. Because, age is such this big belief that we hold ourselves up against. And also head talk revolving around the past. If only I had done X, Y, Z, or maybe things could be different if blah, blah, blah. So, there's a lot of head talk depending on the situation that you're in. And I know when we were talking about it and I said common head talk, probably didn't think the question through as significantly as I could, because my common head talk is unique to me. Your common head talk is unique to you. And I guess this is where the basis of Own Your BS came from, is it's identifying what your common head talk is, knowing that it is true for you and it doesn't matter what else someone else is having. Acknowledge what you are thinking and work with those thoughts, knowing that's what you need to address, not what I'm feeling you're thinking. Does it make sense?
That does make sense.
Yeah.
Now, from the same point of what you just said there, a question came up to me. You talked about the social media and seeing things on social media and comparing ourselves to that. Now and then I see articles that talk about social media in a negative point of view, saying that social media is not doing good things to us as human beings. And I'm just curious, are you possibly suggesting that our lives might be better if we as women weren't exposing ourselves to so much social media, so we didn't have so much that we were comparing ourselves against?
The easy answer would be to say yes, but I think no, because, and this comes down to my philosophy of ownership, because if we don't have social media, we would then point the finger at magazines or news or something, so that there's always a source of comparison from somewhere. My view is that we recognise where the comparisons are coming from, and then we take ownership for our spot in how that's showing up. On social media, for example, if you find that you are constantly comparing yourself to one particular person and that comparison is not leaving you feel good, then you've got a choice. You can either, one, stop following that particular person, or you can empower yourself by saying, okay, well, what is it about this particular comparison that keeps charging me? What am I saying about this comparison, and become clear on what it is that you're actually saying? And then secondly, what is all of that making me feel? Knowing that when I help me, when I solve my emotional charge, that comparison becomes irrelevant. So I think it's more about, and this is, it's almost like a mantra, I suppose, that I just live life by. It doesn't matter whether you're spending your day on social media or whether you spend your day walking through a park or whether you're in a busy office. Everything that you allow to upset you is a choice that you make to have an impact on you. And that's a really hard pill for some people to swallow, because there are some really shitty circumstances in life. There are some women and some people that have some really big challenges that they're trying to navigate life through. And, for a lot of it, we can't change. We can't change the situation that we might find ourselves in. But the one thing we can always change, and the one thing we can always rely on, is how we show up to those circumstances and challenges that trigger us.
Right.
Which takes guts, and it takes commitment and ownership. But when you do that, you also empower yourself to know that regardless of the challenges that do come your way, you have the ability to get through it with ease and grace. Right.
You triggered another thought of an experience of my own with that discussion, and that was a time when I was in my mid-30s. I was divorced, and I had 2 children, and I was working at a small company that only women worked at, but there were like only 5 people in the company, and a coworker who was parallel and had the same responsibilities that I did, but she had a different sales area that she worked in. Her district was different than mine. So when we were in the office, we had desks next to each other. She drove a Porsche, a fancy sports car, and she was married, and her life to me, she had beautiful clothes. I thought if I could only be her, because here I was, this divorced mom of two, and trying to, make ends meet, whereas she was getting the same salary, but with the fact that she was married and her husband was a high-powered executive who made, big money. She was driving this beautiful car where I was trying to keep my poor old car together. I so envied her. I thought that she had everything that I would want to be. But we got to be friends, and I found out that she envied me. There were things about my life that I thought were, my poor life compared to hers, and yet I found out when we got to be really good friends that she thought I had a much better life than she did. Is that something that you experience in any of the head talk work that you've done before?
Yeah, all the time, because your comparison is coming from your perceptions, and we perceive what we want to perceive. So when we are, looking at a situation that's fueled by envy, for example, we look at all of the lack in our life and all of the abundance they have in their life, and we see, that's all we see. We don't see their challenges. We don't see the reality of their existence, because that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for, that perception that charges us. And this is the stupidest thing about comparison, because if you actually sat down with any woman that you're comparing yourself with, you'll find that she is doing exactly what happened in your situation. She's comparing herself to you, and her own insecurities are being fueled through her own filters and perceptions. So this in itself is why comparison is just such a pointless exercise, and yet we all do it.
Right.
We're doing it, and the reason that we're comparing, so coming back to the way the head talk is charged, so in that situation where, you were, look at her, look at Sally. Sally drives a Porsche. She has such a lovely, blessed life. All of that head talk is fueled by your emotion of envy. And so then, because envy is triggered in the brain and in the body to be felt, that feeling then triggers another line of thinking that further strengthens that thought. Oh, and look at the beautiful clothes she wears. Oh my God, she has such a great life. Look at how hard I'm doing it. So the head talk is charging the envy, and the envy is charging the head talk. And this is where my philosophy comes from, because if in that moment you're able to go, okay, let's take a little breather and check out what's going on here. I'm thinking these thoughts and I'm feeling envy. What would happen if you released the charge of envy so that was no longer an issue that was driving your thoughts? If envy wasn't there, what would you feel?
It would change everything. I would.
The thoughts wouldn't even exist.
Right. That's it. I was trying to think. Well, what would I be? There would be no. There would be nothing. Exactly.
So if we can pull ourselves up whenever we're having a thought process, and that's such a wonderful example, because it's not what people would consider a negative emotion of envy. It's not a common thing that we admit to, but envy is quite often what drives comparison. So if we start the process through, okay, what are the actual thoughts that are going on? I'm looking at her car and I'm comparing her Porsche to my car. I'm looking at her clothes and comparing her clothes to my car, and her husband to my single life. What is all of that making me feel? It's making me feel envious. How intense is this feeling of envy? And if you were then to look at that time in your life, you'd probably find other examples where envy was also charging a lot of the way you were seeing the world.
Sure, I bet I would.
Yeah, so when you bring it all the way back down to what does this head talk actually make me feel, now let's work on the emotion so that the emotion no longer prevails, it's no longer the issue. The head talk can then take a different direction. And then you can actually connect with people more organically, because you're not having those thoughts of, oh, well, you're so lucky you drive a Porsche. It can be just a genuine, hey, how was your weekend?
Excellent. Thanks for clarifying that and making it seem like, how come I never understood that before? but perfect.
Because you didn't know what you didn't know.
Right. Now, so the head talk, that comparing that causes the negativity, where do you think that comes from? Is that part of our female brains, or what? Where does it source?
Okay, so there's a detailed kind of answer to this. Two things. Firstly, your life experience, because your envy, for example, in that particular situation would not have been the first time you felt envy. So when you were feeling envy to that work colleague, unconsciously your brain was also recalling all of the other times in your life that you have also felt envy. So the need to compare is something that we establish as a habit from really early on, because every time we compare, it strengthens whatever emotion it is that our brains are perceiving we need more of. Knowing the more that we feel, the brain just goes, oh, well, she's feeling envy. That must be what she wants more of, so let's give her more. The brain doesn't know the difference between negative and positive emotions. It just knows that you're feeling it, and if you're feeling it, you must want to be feeling more of it. Does that make sense?
I believe it does.
So, yeah, so that's the first part of why we compare so much, is because of our own habits that we set up through life. The second, more complex answer to the question is, and it stems from a science called epigenetics. So what they're now proving is that up to 7 generations of emotional baggage and beliefs are passed from one generation to the next. And these emotional 7 up to, if not more, that they can date back 7. So this means great-great-great-great-great-grandmother's insecurities are also within you. And one single pregnancy, this is like mind-blowing when you start to really think of it. So when you were pregnant with your daughter, because you were pregnant with a little girl, while she was in utero, her uterus was already, or not her uterus, but her ovaries were already stockpiling her life supply of eggs. So while you were pregnant with her, your emotional stability was having an impact on her future children while she was still in utero to you.
Amazing.
So one single pregnancy impacts 3 generations just off the bat. So what they're now saying with epigenetics is that we're kind of born with a dormant DNA, dormant genes, where these emotions, let's use envy as an example. Envy is a dormant emotion that is not felt by you as a young baby or as a child. But then something happens in your life, whether it's a hormone fluctuation, which is why it's so prevalent with women, or an event happens that triggers you to feel envy. And once that emotion is triggered to turn on, all of the epigenetic charge from 7 generations back comes into that charge, and that's why we find it so hard to let go of emotion, because it's not just our emotion that we're feeling, it's genetics, and then our life experience amplifies on it.
Awesome. I had no idea. I mean, I probably knew that things that happened to my mother impacted me, but I had no idea of the depth of 7 generations. That's my.
And you don't. I mean, you can find examples in your own family, and this was the part where I really knew what I was learning was true, because when I then started to do some family history work, there were family lines, from my mum to my grandmother, even my father and my grandmother on my paternal side, back in generations where I could see common threads of emotions, not just in me, but also in my aunties and my cousins, where all of us were connected by this emotional strain. And you see it as well in young kids. You'll say, oh gosh, you're so much like your grandmother. They're young kids. They've got no idea how grandmother behaved, but they just instinctively pick up on mannerisms that are passed on genetically. So yeah, it's quite a fascinating thing, and this is why I'm so passionate about educating women with the strategies, so that they can then educate the next generation. You were mentioning in the introduction that baby boomers are experiencing high levels of depression right now. On the flip side of that, so baby boomers are suffering from a lot of depression, but right now in time, more children are being diagnosed with some kind of disorder than any other period in known history. the reason that is happening is same thing. We've got nature versus nurture, so the environment that they're going into, but they've also got all of this genetic shit that is passed on from generation to generation into these poor little bodies. And because we, as the carers, don't know how to handle our own emotional state, we don't know how to teach the next generation how to actively work with what's going on, and instead relying on things like medication to solve the problem. So my passion is about educating the women so that you can go, okay, I'm having a bad day. What am I thinking that's actually causing all of this to happen? I'm thinking these thoughts. It's making me feel this emotion. Let's work with this strategy to release my emotional charge so I can get a grip on today. And then when the younger generation are struggling, we can go, hey, rather than buying into the story of, well, why do you feel sad and where do you think that's come from? We can just go, okay, you're feeling sad, sweetheart, let's address sad, and then we'll look at the solution for the problem. So we can start to be a ripple effect of positive change.
I love that. Now, I was wondering, from that same point of view, I understand, of course, the concept of the need to train women about this, but I was wondering if you thought it would be useful to, not that I don't think there's an awful lot that we're trying to cram into kids in school right now, but would it be worthwhile to train, like in a health class or something, could it be useful to talk about this whole situation with children so that they can understand what's going on, or do they need to be more adult to really understand?
No, kids are so beautiful because kids don't have the perceptions of, what's the word? We as adults are so skeptical. You know, we're raised to question everything and think that everything has to be so hard. That's how we're conditioned. Kids just take it for what it is. And because they've got such beautiful, wild imaginations by nature, they're already in that beautiful, innocent zone where if you can teach them how to harness all of that proactively, you're setting them up to be able to get through life longer. The problem is that the schooling systems and not just the schooling systems, but our society system is so skeptical of anything that has to be, anything that is deemed easy to help can't be true. That's the belief system that most of society has. You know, in order for you to release an emotional block, it has to be a struggle and it has to be hard. It doesn't have to be hard. Who said it had to be hard? And so in regards to taking it to schools, until we get enough adults to actually believe that the power of choice and the power of emotional confidence is something that every person, regardless of age, has the ability to tap into, they're not going to put it into the schools because it's too easy. Does that make sense? So my theory is, and knowing as well that a lot of emotional problems that stem for kids come from the family home. If we help the mums in the family home where they have the most amount of impact on their children to learn these strategies, then they can teach the kids emotional confidence. Let the schools teach academics and let's give the mums the strategies and the tips and the tools and the insights so that we as mums can set our kids up with emotional confidence, knowing that we have the best impact for them anyway.
I like that. I think that's a good thing to be taught in the home. Yeah,
definitely. And, you know, because you're with the kids, you know, yes, they might go to school for 6 hours a day, but you're with them every morning and every night. And most of their problems are going to surface of a morning or of a night time. And this is the way I speak to my kids, and I've been doing this for 5 years. When they come home from school and there's been an activity or something going on that's upset them, we don't go into story because story's not going to solve the solution. We go straight into, okay, and I do this for my little boy as well because he's still young enough to be, you know, open to it. Okay, this happened at school. What are you feeling as a result of it? I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling angry. Okay, do you want to keep feeling angry or do you want to let it go? Now, if they want to keep feeling angry, they can feel angry all they want, but they're not going to actually empower themselves through the process. And they have to learn that sometimes as well. We have to sit in that space of feeling crappy sometimes. But when they then come to me and say, okay, I've had enough of that now, I want to let it go, I then go through a strategy with them. We release whatever emotions is that they're feeling. And then I come back to it and say, okay, so this happened at school. What do you think you could have done differently? Or what do you think you could do next time something like that happens? So that we're educating through the scenarios without the emotion charging it.
Oh, I really like that. I did a little bit of that with my children, but it was just pure happenstance. I didn't know what you're talking about, but I had something that I started during the time when I was a single mom, which I spent maybe 5 or 10 minutes in the evening just before bed with each child individually, and we had what we called a loving talk. That was the name that it became. And basically we started out and we talked about who loves you and going back to grandmothers and grandparents and all the people that it was very positive reinforcement type of thing. But we also talked about what was a good thing that happened to them during the day and what was a bad thing that happened to them during the day. And then when we brought each one of those out and we talked about it, then that gave me a chance to try to give them a little bit of coping skills on how to handle the both the good and the bad things that happened to them. So I didn't know that that it was just a thing I invented, but I think what you're saying would have been a perfect thing to fit into my little nightly talks.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and if you look back on that and what you were doing at that time was mothering from that female perspective of intuition. You didn't understand why you were doing it. You just knew that by creating this little nighttime ritual, it was a good thing. And this is where I think so many women are lost, because we've lost the ability to follow our instinct. If it doesn't make sense, it can't be right. So, yeah, again, that's part of the female factor, is being able to trust that unexplainable, this just feels like it's the right thing for me to be doing in this circumstance. That is part of who we are. And it's something that we do better than men, because we are more connected to intuition than men are.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I've never heard, of a dad who did anything like that. It was a nurturing maternal type of a thing. But moving on, I'd like to talk about, is there a simple strategy that you can share that can help women when head talk becomes overwhelming?
Yes, and I'd love to play with you if it's okay.
Sure.
Would you like to play with me?
I'd love to play with you.
Okay. So when someone comes to me and they're saying they're struggling, this is what I would do, and this is something that you can work yourself through at home as well. So when you think about a common line of head talk that you have, Anne, I don't want to know what the head talk is, but I want to know, what does that common line of head talk make you feel?
Frustrated.
Frustrated. Awesome. Okay, and when you think about frustrated, where in the body does frustrated live?
Kind of maybe abdominal area.
Perfect, abdominal area. And if frustrated was a colour, what colour would it be?
Brown.
It's brown. And on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the strongest, how intensely can you feel frustrated when you think about all of that head talk?
Oh, it could probably get to a 9.
Perfect. Okay. So most important question to ask, is frustrated something you want to release the intensity of, or do you want to hang on to it?
Oh, I'd be glad to get rid of it.
Okay. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. And I want you to imagine now a deflated brown balloon. Tell me when you can see that.
Okay.
Okay, now we're going to take 3 deep breaths together, okay? And every time you inhale, I want you to imagine that all the frustrated is coming up out of the abdominal into the breath, and then we're going to exhale and blow it out into the brown balloon, watching the balloon get bigger with each breath, okay?
All right.
So let's take a big deep breath in now and bring all of the frustrated up out of the abdominal into the breath, and now exhale and blow it out into the balloon.
Okay.
Now take another big deep breath in and bring all of the frustrated up out of the abdominal into the breath, and then exhale and blow it out into the balloon. And now, for good luck, let's take one more breath and bring every last teeny tiny bit of frustrated out of the abdominal into the breath, and exhale and blow it. And tell me, how big is your brown balloon now?
Oh, it's nice and big, fat balloon.
Great. I want you to pop the balloon for me. See the balloon burst.
All right. I did that.
Okay. Now, if we've moved the frustrated out of the abdominal into a balloon and burst the balloon, where did frustrated go?
disappeared into the ether.
Okay. And when you think about how you feel about frustrated now, on a scale of 1 to 10, how intensely can you feel it?
Oh, it's kind of gone, so maybe 0 or 1.
It's kind of gone. So in 3 breaths, you have released yourself from feeling frustrated. And when you think back on that theme of head talk that you were thinking about, how charged do you feel to keep talking about it now or thinking about it?
You're right. I don't know. I don't need to talk about it anymore.
There you go. So this solution or this little strategy that I've just walked you through is not a solution. It's something that alleviates the emotion for the short term, but it's enough for you to create space so that you can now look at the scenario that was causing you to think whatever it was that you were thinking and go, okay, well, now what are my solutions? What am I going to do about that situation? Am I going to go and revisit the thought? No. Okay, so what could I do differently? I'm going to do X, Y, Z. So you can put yourself into a space of emotional empowerment because you've now released the emotional charge.
Excellent. I like that.
It's good, isn't it?
Very good. All right. Well, I see that we're getting close to the end of our hour, so certainly one of the things I don't want to fail to ask you before we get to the part where we're going to close things off here is where can our listeners find you?
So the best place to find me is my website, breestedman.com. So that's BREESTEDMAN.com. On this website, there are some free resources that women can download so that you can, learn some more strategies on overwhelm. You can learn how to work through sabotaging head talk. And you can also buy a copy of my book, Own Your BS, from that website. And, of course, I'm also on social media. So one of my favourite platforms is my Facebook group on Facebook called Emotional Confidence for Women. So everyone's welcome to join that group, and I quite often do videos and share more strategies and more insights so that women can start to get on the path of emotional confidence.
Excellent. I will be joining it as soon as this call is over.
Please do.
So, let's see. Well, I see we have a couple of questions. What can I do for you? Somehow Siri on my phone decided to.
Oh, listen to her.
She's on my watch. I'm not even trying to talk to her. All right, we'll forget about this and get back to these questions. Do you have any thoughts on why do you think baby boomers are, on average, more depressed than other generations? You talked about that 7-generation thing, but it would seem to me that every generation has 7 generations, so I don't think it's just that.
I think, in looking at the history of baby boomers and what you guys went through, that is sure to leave an impact. So the life experiences, with the wars and, men going off to war, and for women, having to step up to fill the gap that was left when men went to war and then have to sort of come back into a new zone when the men return. So life experience, I think, for baby boomers is definitely something that really impacts that level of depression. And also, and this is just a thought, but it's really only been in recent generations that talking about emotions have become okay. So possibly as well, there's a large number of baby boomers that are just starting to get comfortable with admitting that they have negative emotions. And knowing that, emotions are just emotions, really. We put the word negative on them because they make us feel bad, and we put positive on them when they make us feel good. But the more comfortable we get with just speaking about emotions full stop, gives us the ability to be able to work through them, just like what we did with the balloon.
Excellent. Well, given the balloon situation, I think I know the answer to this next question, but just in case you have more, I will ask this other question that we got from our audience, which is, what advice would you give to a friend who is struggling with negative female head talk?
Oh, great question. Oh, I love that question. Okay, so when someone's coming to you, and this is, again, why I entitled my book Own Your BS, is to know that you can't you can't force someone else to see the world differently. If they are feeling in a particular way and it's negative, until they make the decision to change, there's not a lot that we can do. But something that you can start to do when you're having conversations with these people is, rather than buying into the story of whatever's going on in their life. So say a friend comes to you and says, oh, you know, I just don't know why my life is so bad and why so-and-so keeps doing this to me and why I can't get ahead. And they are in story problem mode. They're looking at the details of their life and they're getting caught up in story. So what you can do from an outside point of view is to say to them in a loving way, darling, I hate that this is happening to you. What do you think you can do today to make you feel like you have more control? Or what do you think you can do about that particular situation to make it easier next time? Any question that you ask someone who is in a negative state of mind, if you ask them a what or a how question, you're going to put their brain into solution focus. Now, the trick is to not answer the question for them, but to give them the space to come up with their own solution.
That makes so much sense, because when my daughter comes to me and she's complaining about something that happened at work and I try to give her an answer, she gets angry with me. She says, I don't want you to give me an answer.
No,
she just
no
wants
one
to...
wants help.
Right.
Yep. So what you would just say to her instead is, darling, I'm sorry that this is going, you know, that this situation is happening. I'm sorry that you're struggling with that. What do you think you could do? Or what have you tried? What could you try differently next time? If you really want to offer help and you feel like they are stuck, what do you need from me? That way, again, they then have to go, well, what do I need from her? Maybe I just need a hug. You can do that. Hope that helped.
Yes, I think she would be delighted with it. I mean, she's almost 40, so she's not a little kid anymore, but it's still there are these times when I talk to her and she, you know, is complaining at me, that the mother side of me comes out and wants to try to fix it, and then I get caught up in the fact that she doesn't want me to fix it.
So when that happens, you
I'd learn
your balloon so you don't feel it?
Right. Well, I see that, you know, our time is very close to over here tonight, Bree, and I just want to say that it's been great talking to you. Thanks for being our guest and for this great discussion on overcoming negative self-talk. And I'd like to ask, is there anything else that you want to say before we wrap up the call?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you. It has been a wonderful conversation. If there is anyone who is interested in working with me more directly, there is a link on my website that you can book a call in with me to have a chat about how I work. You know, obviously the book is just the first point of reference. So it's that introduction into owning your BS. I have an online program that is available. It's a 9-week program that offers lifetime access, so that, you know, when life keeps happening, you can keep coming back to it and revisit strategies. And I've also got a one-on-one coaching program that I work exclusively with women to really help you to, you know, where we did balloon and frustrated with you for the in-the-moment stuff, my one-on-one breakthrough program, which is emotional detox, disconnects frustrated or whatever emotion it is that you're feeling at your core. So it is the solution. It's the long-term solution. So if anyone does want to have a chat to me about that, you're more than welcome to book in with me via my calendar. The only catch is I'm going away for the next month. I'll actually be in the States next month doing a bit of a media tour with my book. So find me on Facebook, friend me, you know, send me PMs if you want to connect, and if you want to book in a call, then you can do that as well.
Excellent. Now, you mentioned your book earlier and how it's available. I believe you said it was on your Facebook page that was available. But I'd like to also mention for our listeners that it's available on Amazon, and they can get instant gratification because it's available in Amazon Kindle format as well as the more traditional soft cover binding. And I noticed today when I went and looked that right now the Kindle edition is available at no charge if you happen to have Kindle Unlimited. So I just wanted to let our listeners know about that, because I don't know that is going to last very long, but it's happening right now, and I want to let people know. I highly recommend the book. I certainly think that it's a worthy book to purchase. And also on the Amazon page, as usual with any Amazon book page, there's comments from other people who've read the book. So it's a little bit more information from people that have that have read the book, and I thought that.
And
if
if you do read
it
via Amazon, please by all means leave reviews on the Amazon site as well, because it does help other women to sort of make a decision to trust their gut and purchase it if we all share our experiences with it. So feel free to leave a review.
Good. I like to leave reviews, and Amazon thinks I'm a good person. I have a reputation with them for leaving reviews. So now that I've read your book, I will be going there and leaving my reviews. Certainly you can count on that. But anything else that you'd like to add?
No, that's it. Look, I just want to thank you, and hopefully I'll be able to connect with yourself again and with anyone else who's interested in knowing more about how I can help you to own your BS.
Oh, that's wonderful. I thank you so much for your time this evening, Bree, and thank everyone for listening to us. And this time I'm going to say good afternoon to you, since in Australia it's 4 o'clock now, I guess, and good evening to those people in the United States who are listening to this. And thank you, everyone. And, of course, this call is being recorded, and it will go up on our website. So if people didn't get a chance to catch it, everything, if they want to hear something again on it, go and look for it. It will be there permanently for people to listen to, and it's wonderful information that you've given here tonight. Thank you so much, Bree. And good night, everyone.
Thank you. Night, everyone.
Bye now.